Good afternoon, everyone, and a blessed Ramadan Mubarak for all those fasting. We hope you enjoyed our first session on Sustainability 101 last week by Razif Yusoff and Sharif James. Razif shared with us what it means to be sustainable and why we need to take action. This is further reinforced by the recent IPCC report, which just came out 2 days ago. Sharif then took us through a toolkit that you can use to measure and monitor progress against your sustainability targets. Sharif had set some homework for you last week to start measuring your baselines on energy and water consumption. If you have questions as you start using the toolkit, please feel free to post this in the group forum. If you have not already joined the forum, you will see a link to this in the chat box. We do apologize for the access issues last week. Some could join and some had difficulties. This issue has now been rectified. So please wander over to the group forum for recording of the webinars and other learning materials to help you with your journey. We are so pleased that almost 700 people have registered, and we do recognize that we have a very diverse audience on this program, beginners and experienced practitioners. Taking on board the feedback you provided from last week's session, we will this month aim to prioritize questions from those who are beginning their sustainability journey. So please raise your questions in the Q&A box. There are no stupid questions. There are no questions that are too basic. Just ask us whatever you're worried about. The facilitators are here to help you take your first steps. So please ask away. If we don't get to all your questions, we will address them at the group forum. Kusu Chuang sends his apologies for not being able to make today's session, but I am very pleased to bring back Razif and Sharif to moderate today's discussion with BK Sinha on waste management. For those who were not with us last week, Razif Yusoff is the head of safety and sustainability at Sime Darby Property, and Sharif James is the head of group corporate sustainability also at Sime Darby Property. Razif and Sharif, over to you.
Thank you, Datin, Sri Sunita. Appreciate the opening. Good afternoon and selamat berpuasa to our Muslim participants today. I'm excited to be co-moderating today's session on waste with my colleague Sharif, who is the head for group sustainability and in Sime Property. I'll be reiterating what Datin Sunita mentioned earlier. One is around the urgency for us to take action on reducing your carbon footprint. Remember from last week, it was about clients and companies will expect their supply chain to reduce their carbon footprint. And will that be a selection criteria in the future? And at the end of it, we shared a template with you, and going forward, we would like to hear from you on how you are using the template. Just a few numbers, 332 participants last week, and slightly less than half came back with feedback, 124 feedback. That's why we had feedback like that mentioned earlier around keeping the conversation to those who are starting the sustainability journey. So what Sharif and I will do is we will strike a balance in our discussion to take into account some of the more advanced audience and some of the audience who are just starting on the journey, or maybe just a few years into the journey. But fret not, if we do miss some of your questions, we'll address them in the group chat. Now to the session today. I'm excited, super excited to introduce the coach for today, Mr. BK Sinha, former CEO of MGBC, Malaysian Green Building Council. He is a council member of MGBC. He's a vice chair of the Asia Pacific Network of the World Green Building Council. Over 30 years of experience in project management in Malaysia, Maldives, and Vietnam. And his experience is also very deep into green buildings and waste to energy. BK is respected as a thought leader and a mentor in the region. He is also the innovator of Fat Hopes Energy. Fat Hopes Energy is a leader in the region as a premier consolidator and processor of waste inorganic oils. In one of our carbon footprint is waste. Hence, I feel that BK is well positioned to share with you some of his experience and the fundamentals and the tool you can use to manage your waste. Over to you, BK.
Thank you very much for that very, very flattering introduction, Razif. And a very warm welcome to all of the participants here. A very big thank you to Climate Governance Malaysia for doing their awesome work and blazing the trail forward in sustainability where it matters, which is with the corporates. I would like to start this session, and let me remind myself that I have got 20 minutes from 30 seconds ago. I would like to start this session with everyone, if you could help me to just take a deep breath, hold your breath, and say, this session is about changing my conditioned mind. We have been conditioned, our minds have been conditioned because of our environment, circumstances, and our upbringing. I'm not saying any of this is wrong. I'm saying as times change, this conditioning needs to change, which doesn't happen. And so we misfire in our actions. Think about that. Times and circumstances around us are changing, but our conditioning did not change. We are doing the same things we were taught and practiced and well-versed in, which then becomes detrimental to our environment. That's the first point I'd like to make. I'd also like to introduce you to this magazine, which is free. A link will be given. This magazine has a lot of bright ideas about how you can reuse and repurpose what you would like to throw, or what you usually throw, or what your conditioned mind says throw, right? So here in Circular Economy magazine, as you can see, this is the March 2022 edition. And human communities around the world can enjoy happy occasions with recycled flower petals, which were polluting the river in huge quantities, by using the pigments of these flower petals for their socio-cultural events, avoiding the flowers from polluting the river, avoiding chemical pigments from being used, which were bad for their skin. They soon realized after the event every year. But here we are with many, many bottom lines. Take note also of the words in black. On this slide, which is another page of the magazine, it talks about three very important initiatives. And I've blown up initiative 3, where furniture maker Mobile has partnered with 2 chemical companies to design a resin material from non-edible rice. I'm not sure what that is, because every rice I've known I've eaten. But yeah, I now learned that there's a non-edible rice that would otherwise be thrown away. And what do they do with this non-edible rice? Well, Rice Wave makes it into furniture and replaces polystyrene, which is a highly polluting and huge, very, very long life in the landfill, polluting all the way. This is the one which makes me think about waste very, very deeply. If it was gold, would we throw it away? Then I asked a further question. Can I make it into gold? Can I make it into money? Because money is a newer form of gold. Can I do that? And if I can, how? Can I do that in an economically viable manner, which will reduce my cost instead of increasing it? These are the critical questions that we need to inspect. And lastly, this link that you see is posted on your chat for all of you to copy and download, or rather subscribe to this magazine which you will receive regularly. So let's get on with it. 5 minutes gone. The mindset change here is, instead of that bad word because we've been conditioned to say waste is bad. Waste is smelly, waste is ugly, waste is bad for health. Excuse me. And so those stigma that come around that word, could we discard them and look at if waste can be termed as resources for reuse? Principally, that is what this session intends to prove. The key learnings today would be one of changing our mindset around waste to resources for reuse, and the secret, the kingpin, the cornerstone. I can't emphasize this more, but it is the most important factor of our learning today. We get to separate it at source. If this doesn't start at the source, the entire chain goes wrong. The entire chain becomes what it is today: very polluting, very time-based. Landfills can only take your waste for a certain amount of time. There is no telling what happens when landfills catch on fire, like Pulau Burong in Penang recently. 83 families had to be relocated and 3 schools had to be shut because of the toxic fumes coming out of the methane-powered fuel burning underground. They never even knew where the fire was. Where the smoke was, the fire wasn't there because the fire was moving underground. The smoke was moving underground and escaping somewhere else than where the fire was. So separation at source cures all of this, and we intend to show you how. You know, I was looking at the water coming out of my tap today. I was looking at it after reading an article about nanoplastics, about how plastics find their way into water, about how 8 out of 10 adults in Europe have tested with nanoplastics in their body. Science still does not know on the long term what these nanoplastics do to us in our body, but they know today beyond any reasonable doubt that they exist. So is the water that I'm turning on, the water that I'm drinking, the water that I've just boiled for my coffee or tea, does it contain nanoplastics? This picture made me think. And if it does, am I consuming it unknowingly? Am I also not knowing what it'll do to me when it gets into my body? Just allow me to introduce a little bit about the organization I come from. Malaysia Green Building Council is an established member of the World Green Building Council that operates in 70 countries around the world, principally with the vision to transform business as usual to sustainable in the building and construction industry that contributes to 40% GHG throughout the world, total global emissions. And also the building construction industry has got thousands of downstream industry, as Darby would know very well, supply chain members that impact this GHG production in a great way. Currently, Malaysia Green Building Council has joined the World Green Building Council in promoting their Advancing Net Zero program to look at how buildings can become net zero. And in doing that, we have started an initiative. It's not ready yet, but we have started an initiative to design this carbon tool for buildings. But this is just one tool. I know Sime Darby has its own tool, and I've got some slides on it. I'd like to invite Sharif to explain these two slides. If you might care to do so, Sharif. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, PK. Just to repeat what we presented last week at the kickoff, can we go back one slide? Sorry. Okay, so basically this is just an example of the toolkit being filled out again, covering carbon, water, wastes, wet waste, solid waste, and recycling. It's just basically to say that you can put your monthly data in, and then you will get a profile. You'll be able to actually create the graphical interface to see where are your patterns of your and all your trends of your waste. And then obviously at some point in time you'll be moving on. Once you get your baseline, you'll be able to move on and then create your targets or set your processes that you want to implement to reduce, for example, your carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, but we've listed here as carbon. Optimizing water, reducing solid waste, reducing wet waste, and increasing recycling. Okay, next slide, BK. Right, so this is basically the waste one filled in again, and the key takeaways here is that when you're actually calculating your solid waste and even your wet waste, you can actually convert it into a value that tells you what your CO2 emissions are. So if you take this waste to landfill, like BK has mentioned, it's going to not just be carbon. The carbon is mostly from the transport, but there's also going to be a lot of methane produced once it goes into the landfill at some point in time. So that's a very damaging greenhouse gas. So if you can set a target to reduce your landfill waste, you're going to be reducing your greenhouse gases, that, your environment, part of your environmental impact. I think I'll just leave it there for now, BK, and back over to you.
Thank you very much, Sharif. And a link of this spreadsheet will be shared with the participants so that they can participate in it as well, right, Sharif?
Sorry, yes, indeed, it will be shared. It will be shared via the CGM team, so Audrey will be probably resharing it again. So it was shared with some of the participants that attended last week, and there may be some different attendees this week, possibly.
Yeah, so to all of you out there, please do participate and practice how you can report and find out your carbon footprint, because like the old cliche, what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. So I'd like to go on approximately halfway through my presentation now on an approach. So waste is a little bit different, because when you buy anything, you need to be mindful of what waste is going to produce. And then after you use that product, you have to be mindful how you're going to dispose of that packaging for it not to create negative impact to the environment. So be aware that waste is an issue where you have to be mindful of it before you buy and after you use. Also, to change the word, I'm sorry to go on like a broken record and repeat, because these 2 points will be seen throughout my presentation. They cannot be put, be thought to be any less important than they are. They are very, very important. We need to change the mindset about the word waste and think about resources for use. We need to separate that source. Now, and these 2 points, as we practice to do them actively and we do them seamlessly and do them without thinking about them, it becomes a practice. We will hone our skills in waste management and refine what we are doing till we are sending very little to the landfill and working towards sending nothing at all to the landfill. Now, very quickly on this slide, this is all what the government's roadmap has been in trying to deal with our waste. I take your attention to the last box, which says 1st of June 2016, and above it, it says mandatory source separation. Now, mandatory means, you know what mandatory means, right? You can't escape from it. But the question here is, look at the date 2016, guys. How many people separate their waste, and how many people did the government fine for not following the law? Answer, close to 0, because it's a law that doesn't manifest in the way the makers of that law thought it should. It needs more. And we are about to show you what more can be added to this law to make us law-abiding citizens. So let's look at this. What do we produce first? We measure, okay? In 2019, our population was 32.6 million, and we were producing 38,200 tons of waste a day, commonly called municipal solid waste. Whatever we put in our dustbins from our houses, our factories, or whatever it is, that goes to landfill, goes to a collector. So if you divide the total number of total amount of waste by the total number of people, we will be getting 1.12. I was just listening to the video which Audrey put on before this session. In Europe, it's 1.69. I looked at the discrepancy. Oh, Europeans are worse off than us. But you know what? In every country, as GDP increases, waste increases, and the European GDP is far beyond us. So comparatively, they are still low in that number if we look at it holistically. And this 1.12 kilo, it means close to half a ton a year. And guess what, guys? Out of this half a ton, half of that 200 kilos will be organic waste. And we throw this, it's food waste, it's pre-kitchen waste, roots of vegetable, gills of fish, plus food which is wasted, not eaten, taken out from fridges and thrown. Now, this 16.88 tons which you see is about half of this 38,200 tons we produce every day, okay? About half. And this can fill 16 twin towers every day. That's the amount of only food waste we are producing every day, okay? And you look at this article from the New Straits Times, it can feed 2.2 million people. I know that is very, very difficult for us to do, but at least what else better can we do with this food waste? Now, further, if you look at this chart, which is something compiled through experience of our amounts of energy we extract. If you look at organic fraction of MSW, which is basically food waste, if you have 1 ton and we have 16,800 tons, you will produce about 90 units of electricity. And so with 16,800 tons, you will produce 1.512 million units of electricity. Every day, we are throwing away power that can generate enough power for 15,000 houses. And we've been doing it for decades now. Throwing away this energy and buying energy made from fossil fuel, which is polluting. This is the way our waste is segregated. And we know that generally speaking, we are looking at 3 sections on your right. We don't want to complicate it with so many. We are looking at organic, we are looking at non-organic and reclaimable, and we are looking at the odd fraction, which I will explain. Now, the organic fraction is the ones which we can create renewable energy through biogasification. We also will get organic fertilizer. The reusables go into the usable scheme. The odd fraction are adult and children's pampers, and we can explore future technologies. In California, they grow mushrooms and then they crush the mushrooms and it becomes feed. It becomes compost for plants to grow on. We haven't got there yet. And then there is one more fraction which is not mentioned here because we never throw it into the dustbin, so it's not part of our waste. We throw it into the drain and it causes water pollution and chokes up the drain after some time. It's called used cooking oil. Now, this fraction is very important. And in our approach to the steps towards achieving zero waste, which is zero to landfill, besides the 2 important points of changing mindsets and separation at source, we need to measure these 3 fractions about how much we are producing. Are we within the national average? Are we lower? Can we lower it? Because the lesser we produce waste, the better for us. We gather this quantity and quality, and then we design our mitigation strategies. And we extend these mitigation strategies to a roadmap that will eventually lead us in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, doesn't matter, as long as it does lead us to a zero waste position. We can use life cycle analysis, which is a very deep method of calculating what that waste pollution or negative impact to the environment we are abating. And then we develop a host of robust, holistic, and credible data on municipal solid waste so that we get to critical mass of mitigating this waste, and we can change the way we are dealing with waste on a national level on a permanent basis. 2 minutes left. So as you can see, the red circle says that solid waste disposal is the third largest polluter or emitter of carbon emissions. And not only does all our waste land up in landfill, but a lot of it makes Christmas trees of our mangrove swamps, and very, very ugly ones at that. I mean, children ask us questions, why are there plastic bags up there? And we'll be scratching our heads hard to answer. So here is a case study towards zero waste. It is framed around a high-rise, densely populated. I mean, high-rise is much more denser population than landed property, whether it's apartment, flats, or condominiums. Now, we start this program with separation at source. The kitchen manager needs to manage this, and there's a very short program we can share with them for them to understand what separation at source is. From there, the organic waste is separated, which is about 45%, and this organic waste goes to biogas. This biogas is put into a biogas generator, it generates electricity, and it can light up the corridor lighting. And this biogas machine also can produce organic fertilizer as a slurry or a byproduct, which is very safe. It's got no biological reaction. It is very rich organic fertilizer. It can be used to grow organic vegetables in the compounds of any apartment, flat, or condominium for the consumption of the community to understand the health benefits of organic fertilizer. Then we have 43% of the organic waste fraction. And you have auction organized recyclers, and Dr. Uma is, I think, amongst us in the audience. And if any of you want to know what do I do with this now very dry and clean waste from the rest of the house, you can speak to him, and I have also put his company's name on one of my slides for you to follow up. And then you have the odd fraction, which 12%. So can you imagine if we actually are able to send 12% to the landfill, we would have reduced our landfill pressure by 88%, guys. That's a huge takeaway. Lastly, we have used cooking oil, which the community will get instant cash instead of throwing out down the drain, causing water pollution, and causing them to pay for cleaning up their pipes when it gets choked. So this is a biogas machine, very quickly, quite similar to what happens in our stomach. Food waste goes in, we produce biogas. The gas can be used for cooking. The gas can be used for production of electricity. And what comes out as slurry is very rich organic fertilizer. Now, what would you see if you run this program in your apartment? You would see a glorified dustbin like this. And you would see a genset like this, which is a little bit bigger than the gensets you see in the Pasar Malam. And all of this would take up no more than 3 car park spaces. It doesn't have to be car parks to display cars. It can be equivalent size of 3 car park spaces anywhere in the apartment. And I would like to say that the genset will operate at very low sound levels. The biogas operates at no sound levels, no smell. And the biogas will be powering up the gensets, and the gensets can light up all your corridor lighting and save you TNB bills, which a fraction of your management fees are when you pay your management fee every month. I'm out of time a bit, but very quickly, this picture was taken from the same building at different times of the year. And this is what air pollution can cause if we keep sending our waste to landfills. We shouldn't be ashamed of our waste. We should responsibly deal with it, as shown, some of the pathways as shown in this presentation. This, for the want of a better cliche, is the elephant in the room. We should not say that just because I put it outside my door and it magically disappears, everything is good. It is going to come back and bite us. It is already doing it in some places, like the Pulau Burong landfill fire, which they took more than 2 weeks to put off. By the way, I'm not sure we have a very good collection and treatment system of our tires, but tires, when processed properly, can give us carbon black, which can be recycled back into new tire manufacturing, can give us steel, and can give us light fuel oil to be burned in boilers to replace or displace fossil fuel base. So I leave you with this thought that we cannot become what we want to be by remaining what we are. We need to do things differently. And that is the first starting point. We do the same things, we will get the same result. So the key learnings would be, again, never enough, changing mindset of the word waste, using separation at source, and Sime Darby cleverly designed a program for you on a simple Excel sheet. Quantify your waste by using eco-efficiency data collection and collation templates. For your dry waste recycling, here is a resource you can contact Dr. Umar. If you have any questions, if he's in the audience, he could answer. Here is a resource which will give you cash. It's not the only one, there are the others. Be wary to check that they don't recycle that oil back into food. And there are ways to check this chain of custody. And of course, if you want to explore ideas, unfortunately, I'm not boasting, but I couldn't find another person who would integrate systems for high density development of what to do, mitigating their waste. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your kind attention and welcome your questions. Thank you. And I'm sorry for being 5 minutes over time. Thank you very much.
VK, thank you very much. They were very insightful and inspiring as well. Two things resonate very strongly with me. I think one is the separation at source. I mean, it's not only at the office, also at home, we have to change our mindset. And what really blew my mind was actually changing our mindset is the most important thing that we have to do. And you know, the language has to change as well. Jangan buang sampah. I mean, it'll be. I will tell my kids, jangan buang resource too, right? And thank you very much for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is Q&A, and if you have any questions, please type your questions into the chat box. Ask any questions, even if it's basic questions, which we will focus our attention to and address them as much as possible. While the questions are coming in, we do not have one yet. Oh, by the way, BK, Dr. Umar has given his information here if any of you would like to copy and paste. Maybe I start with a basic question. I think there are a lot of information. I have a few pages of notes as well. So let's say I'm an SME and I'm about to start on my own waste optimization or waste reduction journey. What should I be looking at to start off my journey?
I'm sorry, but I need to say this. It's too tempting. You should be looking at your waste to start off your waste journey. Yeah, that would be the short answer. So to give you a summary of the various points throughout my presentation, number one, before you buy, think about what waste it's going to produce. Think about how you are going to mitigate all this cardboard, a box within a box within a box within a packet of plastic. It's sometimes how packaging comes through. How are you going to deal with all of this? When you hear the call for paper, lama, you got money floating out there, which is willing to exchange your paper. Do we subscribe to it, or do we still throw paper into our dustbin? These are the kind of thoughts. Why does my waste have to be so smelly by the time I reach end of the day? Can I do something where the smelly stuff goes into another dustbin and I can close this bin so that I don't get this smell, or I don't have to send my maid or myself out at night to clear the waste, because if I don't, after dinner there is more smelly waste coming out. Can I separate it to keep it separated? These are the thoughts. Now, sometimes people ask me, why should I separate my waste when I see the truck coming and they mix everything back and they throw it in? Well, I'd like to use this analogy that, you know, we citizens of the country, we are not drops in the ocean. We are the ocean. Without drops, there won't be ocean. And so our action, irrespective of whether they recombine our waste to throw it back, our action sends messages. When enough of us are separating our waste, they will be tired to put it back together. Or when enough of us are separating our waste, we ourselves will know, don't let it go to the truck. They are going to mix it. We will take charge of it. The beautiful thing about waste is something that I want to share, which I realized. The minute you allow it to go out of your gate, you have given up possession and your right over your waste. Whatever stream it will go into, it will do what it will do, and you have no control. As long as you design what you want to do with it before it leaves your gate, you have full and total control about how you want to shape your and your future generation's waste management system. Think about that. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, thanks, VK, and thanks for rewiring my brain a little bit. Perhaps
Got a good question on the
yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, Razif, there's BK. There's a question here that I think we highlight. There's a couple there. So the question from Sabrina is waste reduction an option? What are your thoughts based on the 5R framework, and what can corporates, and I think I'll extend it, SMEs, to do to support the approach?
Awesome question. Let's look at the 5 R's. 5 R's are words that are completely useless if an infrastructure of 5 R's is not behind it. Do we have it? We use those words so freely and easily. And as much as we want to, it causes, you know, these words without the infrastructure is what causes frustration. And with this frustration, it causes us to shut down on any initiative that we want to take. Don't think about it. Don't think about anything outside your framework. If you're an SME, go look at your waste. Look at what the government has said about hazardous waste or biohazard waste, and check if you produce any of those, you will need to, by law, separate it, which I'm sure you're already doing. Sometimes some of these biohazard waste are borderline. You want to get somebody to identify what you can do, because the minute you separate it, you'll have to get a government designated collector to come and collect it and destroy it, and you pay money. So make sure that one is accurate. That is a cost center, not a benefit center for you. Now look at the rest of your waste. Do a demographic study of it. Analyze it. You know that everything that can rot will give you energy. That's the simplest formula you can have. Now, is there enough in my organization that can rot to give me sufficient energy for me to invest in it? Let's look at it, because you can also compost it, and you can stop buying fertilizer, or you can stop telling the contractor you've appointed to do landscape within your factory space, if you have one, or if you have an internal gardener, you can stop buying chemical fertilizer and use this compost to start with. Now, if you're producing too much compost than you can use, you would seriously want to look at producing energy out of that organic waste. As for your inorganic waste, again, I'd like to, if possible, give Dr. Umar 1 minute. Dr. Umar, can you, is it Can I do this, Razif? Can Dr. Umar talk 1 minute about how he would engage with communities to take their dry waste away, especially after it's separated because we've taken the smelly, gooey stuff out, please? Thank you.
Yes, I'm opening the floor to Dr. Umar.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. BK, and also to the organizers. Now, very quickly, what we do is we do two types of collection. We do fixed collection as well as on-demand collection. And as I mentioned in the chat group, there are three important elements in the waste management or resource management. And also to identify the waste data analysis or the waste data flow is very important for not so much maybe for the household, but for SMEs, for industries is also to identify. And as Mr. BK mentioned, it is not only getting some resource back or a motivation like in terms of cash and so on, but also in terms of saving from the very beginning for SMEs at the beginning stage of the purchasing itself. Now, with the communities and so on, we have fixed collection whereby they separate the source, they separate their waste and recyclables, and we accept all sort of waste or resources, I would say recyclables, including your straws, packaging, and so on. We have a totally different approach. The reason is we don't just go by economic of scale, but we go more towards the traceability and transparency. And this is where the EPR comes in as well, the extended producer's responsibility, whereby the brands are taking responsibility to identify and also to know where their product waste is ending up to, who's collecting, who's recycling, and what is the carbon footprint like, and so on. So we provide the service. At the same time, we do the traceability and transparency to support their sustainability report. As a households, you can also do that. You can contact me and we will be able to guide you how to do so. Thank you.
That's just awesome. Now, ladies and gentlemen, somewhere in between there is indirectly Dr. Umar suggesting to you that you will get money for your waste. I know that it's very difficult to say this as a blanket statement, and every single initiative has to be looked at before you can convert it. It can be converted into cash. It just needs to be studied. There is a question here, Razif, if I may broach this topic a little bit. It's saying that is biogas systems readily available and how do you introduce them to offices and residential? Yep. So the answer is yes, biogas systems are readily available, but the statement is still the same around what I just said. Every single point where waste is gathered is like a thumbprint. It's a unique thumbprint. We've got to look at the people producing it, what activities they are involved in, and how that waste manifests in the bin. What is the system of collection from all the offices in one building to come to this bin, and how often it is done? We need to study all these parameters and demographics before we can give you an answer to what design you need to do. Don't be wary. This sounds complicated. It can be done in a couple of hours and with one visit if data is ready. So there is no challenge actually. There is none at all. It's only whether your mindset has changed, you separate at source, and you really have the will to want to go in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, there's another few questions here. I'd like to highlight one that just came in from Sabrina. Can we focus on reducing waste consumption in the first place? I think to extend that, not only can, but how?
Yeah, so this is the first notch on the hierarchy of waste management. Everyone who has drawn this triangle of hierarchy waste management comes from the West, where you have greater consciousness and internal mechanisms to want to feel benevolent towards our environment. we want to be kind to it. Here in Asia, it holds true, it holds water. The question is, how do we make it happen given our conditions of fighting to survive, our conditions of competition out there to make a living, our conditions of not having reached the European or Western world standards of living, and yet wanting to compromise? Are we willing to accommodate that? Our conditions of the Western world has gone through and produced whatever CO2 they want to produce and developed, whereas we are developing. Do we then make that sacrifice whilst we are developing? So these are complex questions. I don't have all the answers. I would like to do the low-hanging fruit approach and go to a very disciplined practice of how we deal with the waste we are producing. And once we are so well-versed in it, we can ask further questions of, do we really need to produce this much of waste? Is there infrastructure, I use that word again, where we can go to shops and take our own container and buy stuff and they can put it into our container? Is that the exception, or is it the norm now that we can practice these things and save packaging? Those are the ways we would approach this issue of the waste hierarchy of reduction of waste. Thank you.
Any other questions, Sharif?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few coming, and I'm trying to decide which one to highlight. Okay, from Lim Tan. BK, how the waste can count towards carbon emissions? I know we've touched on this briefly in our Sustainability 101, and you've also tried to touch it on in your presentation here, but is there a measurement standard for waste savings for carbon emissions reduction? So we use the figure 917 kilograms for 1 ton, but that's a generic, that would be different depending on the waste profile, I would say. So we use the generic one based on a generic waste profile where certain amounts organic and inorganic, etc. BK, is there anything, I know you touched also on the GBI tool that you're developing, would that be of relevance?
Yeah, that would, even yours, irrespective of what generic carbon factor it uses, even your tool, whenever the MGBC tool, which is sometime in the third quarter of this year, is ready, can be used. MGBC tool, unfortunately, would be building centric. But then buildings, like a house is a building and it produces waste. It's not going to be only for construction-based waste. There will be some limitations. That's why I say that MGBC's tool will be building centric. So I want to answer this question in a little bit of a philosophical, take a philosophical approach. When you do good, you get only good. If your intention is earnest in doing good, you will never get anything bad. So what happens here is how we connect that to the question is that we start by separating, we proceed to quantifying, then after we separate and quantify, we design responsible methods. And responsible methods right there means stopping the methane, which is 23 times the global warming potential than carbon dioxide. We stop that, we use, from going into the atmosphere, we use it as energy. The minute we use it as energy, we are displacing fossil fuel-based energy. So we've got double discount here. And we get all these goods because good things, because we've already practiced a good behavior or a change of behavior to a good behavior of climate compliance waste management methodology. Then to come very soon, end of this year, is a beautiful reward called carbon credit. Malaysia is going to develop and launch its own voluntary carbon market. If we are able to design systems, even from apartments, that were doing it as business as usual before, and are now going to climate or environment compliant methodology, we can apply for a credit there. It's real. It can be done. It has been done. So that would be a bonus reward for all the good that we have done along that chain of activities. Thank you.
That's very interesting, BK. Razif, how much more time do we have for the Q&A part?
We still have 10 minutes.
Okay, so I just want to highlight one more question.
Just to reiterate, Sharif, you're the expert in the Sime Darby template. Lim's question was, is there measurement standard? Are you saying that as they use the template, they need to know the 917 conversion? Or
They don't
is
need to know it. It's actually embedded in the
Okay.
template within the formula. What they would need to do, though, is as they become more experienced, they would need to seek out the new guideline, because the GHG and the IPCC guidelines and protocols tend to get updated once a year or once every couple of years. So you need to look at the denominator factor in the formula to see if you've got the right formula still. So that's getting towards that complex stuff that I don't think we need to go deep diving into now. But that's the situation. So you can use the existing template that's been prepared, and it will be good for about a year, but you'd need to then look at, does the 917 still apply next year, or has the science improved over time? Is there a specific one? I don't know if the 917 is a global one or if the 917 is specifically for Southeast Asia, you know, because our waste profiles will be different to the West, obviously, BK, correct?
Okay, all right. But what's important is start, even what BK mentioned, start measuring your data, right?
Yep.
And it took us quite a number of years before we say, okay, we're fairly confident with our data.
And we're still learning as well.
We're still learning, yeah. Okay, Sharif, next question, please.
This one here is a very interesting one. And I think you're going to have a few different angles to this, BK. The question is from Musley. Why Malaysian homes don't use sink shredder? I think he's talking about incinerator to shred their kitchen waste, which ideally would then end up going into the grey water.
Yeah, interesting question, all right. Thank God Malaysian households don't use the incinerator. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It's another way of posting all your organic waste to a different location and don't care where it goes and what happens to it. Guys, there is energy in your food waste. Food gives us energy. We are throwing that energy away and buying energy from TNB. I can't make sense out of it, although I've been doing it for the last 50 years of my life. I mean, we've got this logic capacity to reason things out. We buy paying money from someone who is polluting at the power plant, and we're throwing away money from something that we've already bought and can give us the same quality of energy, electricity at 240 volts, 50 hertz per cycle, and you know, it's no difference at all. And yet we just do it day in and day out. The incinerator is a quick, easy way to just make everything disappear. It will probably consume energy produced by coal and oil and gas and whatever, and put more carbon dioxide into the air. It will break down because it's a moving part, unlike a biogas machine, which is not a moving part. The bacteria in there keeps doing the work for you. And it can, theoretically, if you don't put in any acid or anything that will kill the bacteria, it will work for you forever. Like how you can make yogurt in a container forever as long as you've got a bit of the starter. That's the same process, biologically explained in lay terms. So the incinerator is just something which, for the want of a better word, more affluent people will have to make things disappear. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Have a lot of environmental damage on waterways too eventually. Yeah. There's another question here, BK. Can you explain a bit more about how Act 672 will comply to companies? I think this is something relevant to SMEs and relevant to large corporates, but it's only got certain geographic coverage, hasn't it, the Act 672 at the moment? For example, it's relevant to KL, but not Selangor per se at the moment. That's our understanding.
My understanding is Selangor, Penang, and Perak.
Oh, okay, Selangor now.
Has not ratified. Selangor, Perak and Penang, have not ratified that
Right.
act yet.
Mm.
Having said that, Penang has got the highest recyclable rate. So it's really not governance or policy, it's will. It's political will that will drive. I mean, I know Chief Minister at that time, Lim Guan Eng, said that in 1 year we're going to ban plastics in supermarkets. He got a bullet. I know this. Somebody posted him a bullet and say we are bona fide. They didn't say what business. You cannot stop bona fide licensed business in this country from doing what we want to do. It is not a communist country. So, of course, the response was, I can give you 1 year to change your mold to produce longer lifespan materials out of the same plastic. He didn't back down, and therefore Penang today has got the highest recycle rate. I think it's reached a national aspiration of 22%, which none of the other states have reached. And this aspiration was announced nationally, and opposition political state controlled. I won't go into that, but I just want to tell you that whenever political will is there to drive, things will happen. I missed your question, and so I'm not sure how I'm going to bring this back to relevance. But what was your question again, Seri?
Basically, how does Act 672? Well, how's it going to impact businesses?
So how it's going to impact businesses is that Act 672, if you look at it closely, you can, an act, every act works on an intent. And the intent of that act is to cause less environmental damage and decrease pressure of landfills. Because we're running out of landfills, our population is growing, we are getting into more and more remote locations to build landfills and destroying pristine biodiversity there. So Act 672's intent is to take the pressure off landfills. And so it tells you to separate your waste. And so if you tell them that I am complying by, you didn't tell me I have to separate it into 15 or 10 or 5 different. I'm separating the organics from the inorganics. Now you can channel it into recycling or reusable streams more easily, simply because it's cleanly and neatly separated. Now, whether it's a household or a company, an SME or an MNC, it doesn't matter. As long as you can put it in 2 different bins, you're good. And you must not get frustrated when you see both those bins being consolidated at the collector's truck. Just keep doing it. Then you can measure what is in each bin. Then you can design how you want to use that instead of giving it away. Again, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, BK. Thanks, Sharif. Maybe we can take one more question, Sharif.
Okay. Give me 30 seconds. I'm going to go back to one that was raised very early on from Roslan. And sorry we didn't get back to you earlier, Roslan. The question is, zero waste to landfill certificates. How legitimate and effective are those in managing waste sustainability, specifically in Malaysia? Sustainably, specifically in Malaysia.
I completely, your voice went fuzzy in between. Could you repeat that, please?
The question is basically zero waste to landfill certificates. How legitimate and effective are those in managing waste sustainably in Malaysia?
To be honest, I've never heard of a zero waste to landfill certificate. Have you, Sharif?
No, it's the first time I'm hearing the term as well. Maybe it's something coming out.
Okay, anyway, so let's say
can I add on to that, since we're on that topic?
Sure.
Because I deal with new project as I deal a lot with waste management, and one of my client, Datin, last December they have managed to have a zero waste to landfill. So it means that all their food waste are being composed, all their plastic and glass are being reused internally. They make bricks out of it. They make few different things. The glass they turn it into sand, and then they can make other things. And some of the things that they cannot throw away, I mean, like cannot process, they have something called the asher. where it's not like a burning thing. It's something, but it turn it into ash, and then
Yep.
it's being used as filler. So that it's one case that I'm excited for, and since we are on that topic of zero waste to landfill, there is a company that is doing here now.
Okay.
And the certificate, do they get a certain certificate, and how does it work? Are you aware of that, Haris?
I think it's more of an internal thing because they wanted to be one of
Okay.
the most sustainable thing. So they have a lot of this thing.
Okay, all right. So that's the last question. So it is still hanging in my head, the landfill certificate. BK, awesome presentation. I mean, I really learned a lot. I think Pearl from Carlsberg also said thank you to you as well. Sharif, thanks for co-moderating, and especially to CGM in putting together this sustainability journey series. With that, I bring the call to an end. Thank you, everyone. Next week's participation. Next week is energy efficiency on 13th April by Encik Zaini Abdul Wahab, a committee member of MESCO. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm just so blown away by this. Really hope that many more of us recognize waste as wealth, a resource for reuse. Thank you so much, BK, for sharing these inspiring tips. As Pearl mentioned, wit and wisdom. And thank you so much, Razif and Sharif, for deftly moderating our discussion today. To Harith, such an experienced, highly regarded sustainability leader, for joining the discussion. So everyone on this call, do check out the links shared by BK as you explore how you can turn your waste into a resource. And don't forget to bookmark the links in the chat box that will help you on your learning journey. We're going to play the video again, so you have a little bit of time, so don't panic. As you all leave the webinar today, you will be presented with a survey. Please give us your feedback so that we can work on making your learning experience better over the rest of this series. Now, our session next Wednesday, as Razif has already mentioned, will be on energy efficiency. Did you know that up to 90% of our energy is actually lost during the generation and transmission stages? Well, you have to check in next week to the presentation by Zaini Abdul Wahab from MESCO, the Malaysian Association of Energy Service Providers. See you back here, all of you, same time next week. Get your friends to sign up.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
World population growth is negatively impacting the planet. Apart from global warming and resource overexploitation, waste generation is a major problem. For example, every European citizen generates an average of 1.69 kilograms of waste per day. That is more than 620 kilograms per year. Over 60% of waste generation results of product containers and packages that are often made to be disposed of after one use. Until recently, waste management was focused on dumping waste in landfills or incinerating it. This approach is not sustainable for several reasons. It poses serious risks for the environment, living beings, and people's health. It fails to reduce the consumption of resources, raw materials, and energy. It does not address the cause of the problem, the consumption model, but only the consequences, the waste management. Until recently, the production and consumption model was mainly linear. That is, it comprised a sequence of stages: resource extraction, production, consumption, and waste disposal. This model, in which waste is disposed of, is highly polluting as it damages the water in rivers and oceans, lowering the quality of drinking water, the land by reducing soil quality and causing desertification, the air, which becomes polluted, provoking global warming. This pollution also has serious consequences for flora and fauna and for people's health. The way of fighting these effects starts with changing our model of production and consumption from a linear economy to a circular economy. In order to do so, it is essential that companies and consumers change their way of thinking and acting. Companies must design products in accordance with a circular economy approach, using waste as raw materials and reducing the use of resources. But consumers also have a great responsibility. Consumers must use products responsibly, applying the 3Rs rule: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reducing means preventing the generation of waste, modifying our consumption habits, and purchasing products responsibly. Reusing means using a product again for the same function by repairing it or for alternative uses, extending its useful life. And recycling means reintroducing waste materials into the production cycle as raw materials. The 3Rs rule is hierarchical, which means that actions are ordered according to their priority. First, reduce consumption. Second, reuse products. Third, recycle only when the first two options are not feasible. How can we do this? Here are some ideas to implement the 3Rs. To reduce our consumption, we can limit the purchase of products that are disposable or have bulky packaging. Reduce plastic bag use when shopping. Use electrical appliances efficiently. Purchase the products we need through the sharing economy. Make the most of municipalities' public services. We can reuse products mainly by repairing electrical appliances instead of buying new ones. Being more creative, to give a second life to objects that have already been used. To recycle, we must separate different types of waste correctly and throw them into the appropriate trash bin or take them to waste management centres. Applying the 3Rs rule is really beneficial for society and for the planet. It is up to us to change our production and consumption models, support sustainable growth, and create a better future for everyone.